Welcome to The Pilgrim, the podcast for Jesus followers like you who wants tips and advice to grow their faith in the ups and downs of journeying through this world. I am O. Living and I'm your host. In the last episode, we saw what Paul meant when he said that living means living for Christ. He wrote, "For to me, living means living for Christ, and dying is even better." Why did Paul say dying is even better? We see the meaning of this word in verse 23 of Philippians chapter 1. I am torn between two desires. I long to go and be with Christ, which is far better for me. What a battle must be going on in Paul's mind about what he should choose, life or death. To go and be with Christ was far better, and therefore dying is far better. In this verse, we learn a great deal about what it really means to live for Christ. And it is this: how a person views the end of life always affects the way they live. If a person views himself as being a lawyer in the future, it will affect the type of courses he will take and how hard he will study, because he realizes that he must be at the top of the course in order to be competitive and to get into law school. Our view of the end always affects the way we live now. This is also true about how we view death and therefore eternity. How many Christians don't view death as even better because they don't realize that what is waiting for them on the other side is so much better than life here on earth. When Christ called them to store up treasures in heaven in Matthew chapter 6 verse 19, instead of on this earth, it doesn't motivate them much because they think their job and their career and their house and their money and their fame and their fortune are what life is really about. Your view of the end affects the way you live now. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verse 32, Paul said, "If there is no resurrection, let's feast and drink, for tomorrow we die." If there is no resurrection and no heaven to look forward to, why not live for carnal pleasures like everybody else do, Paul asks. But if there is a resurrection and eternity, then it should constantly affect the way we live. This is why Paul viewed death as even better, as gain, and also why he chose to daily live for Christ. In fact, we can learn a lot more about his view of eternity by his use of the word "to go and be with Christ" to describe death. The Greek word here is a very rich word picture which teaches us a great deal about how we should live and how we should view eternity and death. So what can we learn about eternity from Paul's use of word to refer to death? I will give you 4 meanings, then I will close. Number 1, to go and be with Christ means we are on a camping trip. As a tent maker, dying to Paul was a picture of taking up his tent and going home. He saw life as a temporary dwelling until he went to his permanent home. This is the same picture he uses in 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 1 to 2. He said, "We know that when this earthly tent we live in is taken down, that is, when we die and leave this earthly body, we will have a house in heaven, an eternal body made for us by God himself and not by human hands. We grow weary in our present bodies, and we long to put on our heavenly bodies like new clothing." Paul groaned to go to his permanent home. If we realize how temporal this life really is, then we wouldn't spend so much time investing in it. Instead, we will focus on the eternal. When you lodge an hotel room, you don't spend a lot of time or money making that hotel room more comfortable as you would do your home. Why? It's because you know your stay there is temporal. This is true of our lives on the earth as well. Many Christians spend their entire life focusing on the tent instead of preparing and investing in their eternal dwelling. Paul describes such Christians as just escaping the fire at the judgment seat of Christ in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 15. When God tests their work, they will be found to be lacking. They will enter heaven, but none of their work are rewarded because they were all temporal. They spent their life building their tent instead of their eternal home. That is the first, I would say. Number two, to go and be with Christ means we are on a sail to where we truly belong. It means to pick up your anchor and set sail. Paul saw life as sitting at the dock. A sailor lives for the journey, for the adventure. They love being at sea. It is while at sea that they are really alive. And if we think this life is exciting, wait until the next. That is when life, the one we truly desire, really begins. But sadly, our view of heaven has been dulled by the movie industry. We think heaven is a place where we wear a white gown with wings and a gold ring over our head, playing a gold harp. But however, we see Christ describing himself as awarding believers with cities and properties to manage in the coming kingdom for their faithfulness on earth. Is that boring? We won't be bored. We will be gladdened in Jesus through a rapturous worship. The book of Revelation helps us give us a clearer picture of heaven. In Revelation 20, we are seen ruling with Christ on the earth. Revelation 21 shows heaven as a city. From that, we can assume all the characteristics of any city. There will be commerce, there will be arts, there will be entertainment, there will be business, leisure, and food. In Revelation 22, verse 2, John wrote about the tree of life bearing 12 kinds of fruit, one for each month. A regular tree bears fruit once a year, and one kind of fruit. Heaven is beautiful, rich, and diverse. And to depart is to start our adventure. The person whose life means living for Christ is not living for this world, but living for the next. And dying is even better. To go and be with Christ is to begin the real adventure which our soul really desire. Number 3, to go and be with Christ means we are on a political contention. It means to set a prisoner free. Here on this earth, we are bound to the flesh, our sin nature. I struggle with pride and insecurity and lust and anger and many other sins. But in heaven, I will completely be like Christ. I will no longer carry around this old nature in my body. My body will be totally free from sin. One of the greatest things about death is that we will finally be free. We will be fully free to worship, to serve, and to love, and to enjoy God fully. A person who is living for Christ is yearning with the rest of creation to be set free from the decay of this earth. Paul wrote in Romans chapter 8 verse 22 to 23, we know that all creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to this present time. And we believers also groan, even though we have the Holy Spirit within us as a foretaste of future glory. For we long for our bodies to be released from sin and suffering. We too wait with eager hope for the day when God will give us our full rights as His adopted children, including the new bodies He has promised us. Number 4, to go and be with Christ means we are farming. It means to release a yoke. Paul saw himself serving Christ on this earth, laboring to see the kingdom come and to help Christians grow in maturity. But in heaven, he awaited a release from labor. At least as we know it here in this world. It is not that we will not serve in heaven, because we will, but the burden and the weight of service will no longer be there. Revelation chapter 14 verse 13 says, I heard a voice from heaven. Write this down. Blessed are those who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit. They are blessed indeed, for they will rest from their hard work, for their good deeds follows them. In heaven, we will rest from our labor and our deeds will follow us. We will be rewarded for our deeds, and the benefits will continue throughout eternity. To live for Christ means to labor here on earth, to sweat, to discipline ourselves, to suffer for Christ. But at death, it means to release the yoke. What is your view of eternity? Do you have an eternal perspective? I can tell by the way you live. If you haven't given much thought to heaven and eternity, it will show in your life. It will show in the way you live. It will show by what truly makes you alive. If we don't view death as far better, we will live this life just like the world, consumed with promotion, success, fame, and fortune, and the temporary things of this life instead of eternity. Paul saw going to be with Christ as something far better. What does the way you live your life say about your view of the end? Living for Christ means dying is far better, because dying means being with Christ. And that's it for today's episode in the podcast. Thank you for listening. See you next time. I remain your host, O.O. Living.